দর্শক শুভেচ্ছা চলতে চলতে অনুষ্ঠানে আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি মাহফুজ মিশা আজকে আমার অতিথি ঢাকায় ব্রিটিশ হাই কমিশনার রবার্ট ডিকসন হিজ এক্সেলেন্সি মোস্ট ওয়েলকাম টু আওয়ার শো চলতে চলতে
Hi, how do you do? Hi.
Yeah, I'm fine. Everything is fine so
Very
far?
good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So you know you were in Bangladesh for more than 2 years.
Nearly 3 years.
Nearly 3 years. And Bangladesh is celebrating its 50 years this year. And Britain and Bangladesh, you were like our friend from our birthhood. If Bangladesh and Britain, we can discuss the relation. So after 50 years, where Bangladesh is stand right now?
Well, I think if you look at the achievements over the last 50 years of Bangladesh, they're quite remarkable. I mean, it's an economy that has grown enormously, very strong progress on development and social economic indicators, a country that is making a contribution throughout the world through UN peacekeeping. So I think Bangladesh is a leading global citizen. It's a country that has achieved remarkable things from a difficult start in 1971 to where it is in 2021. It's a huge achievement.
Once upon a time, after 1971, Bangladesh was called by our foreign friends bottomless basket, and now this time they are telling it at wonder of economy. What are the basic reason behind this economic growth and social growth?
Well, I think Bangladesh got a lot of things right early on. I mean, there's been a strong focus by successive governments on the social development goals of the United Nations, the sustainable development goals of the United Nations. So that policy has been well driven throughout government. I think it owes a lot to the inherent resilience and creativity of the Bangladeshi people. And I think it also owes a lot to the private sector here, who have become globally competitive in specific areas. And I think that's a really good foundation for the next stage, because what I do think is that LDC graduation is basically, it's not a finishing line.
It's just starting.
It's a milestone. In a way, it's a starting line. And I think for any country, graduation is a huge achievement, but the next step, the next stage of the development journey is actually quite a tough one, because the risk is of falling into the middle income trap, as they say, and the key to sustained development beyond graduation is having institutions which can secure the confidence of international investors so that public and private capital come in to fund the next stage of economic growth.
If we look at India, they have graduated, but still they can't make it fulfill. And Bangladesh, especially in the RMG sectors and other import sectors, we have some challenges. Do you really think where Bangladesh stands right now, we can come over this challenge?
Well, no, I'm sure you can, because I think, one lesson of the last 50 years that it's always wrong to bet against Bangladesh, because there are enormous inherent strengths in the people here, in their resilience, creativity, ambition. But what I think is needed is the right institutional structure in this country to really harness those tremendous Bangladeshi traits effectively. And that means institutions that work, it means the rule of law working in a way that encourages foreign investment to come in. It means economic and capital market institutions which can really put international capital to work in the service of development and economic growth in Bangladesh.
So you have very good connection with the British investors also, and we know there are many big companies still working here, and sometimes their size of investment is going. So what is their mindset about investment climate here in Bangladesh? I want to know especially about the new investors who want to join here.
Yeah, well, I think what I would say is that there are some obvious challenges to investment in Bangladesh. So there are issues around the rule of law, around governance. So some of those issues I think international investors find quite, when they look at Bangladesh as a prospect, they see the growth, they see the numbers, they see the scale, they like that, but they also look at some of the issues around ease of doing business, and they realise that Bangladesh is a challenging market. Britain is the second largest cumulative investor in Bangladesh, so we have companies like Standard Chartered Bank, like HSBC, like Unilever, who do very good business here in Bangladesh, but they've been here for a long time. And what I would like to see is more British companies, particularly in services and high-end goods, the things that Britain produces really well, and where I think there's a growing market in Bangladesh thanks to economic growth. What we need to see is the investment climate in Bangladesh made more favourable to new investors.
So several times you got the chance to talk with the foreign officials, foreign minister officials in Bangladesh, as well as Minister of Commerce and other government officials. Have you ever expressed this idea to our policymakers to make the foreign investment easier?
Oh yes, we've talked about it a lot. I mean, in fact, since we left the European Union, we now have a bilateral UK-Bangladesh trade
direct
dialogue. So we've addressed all of these issues. I think we had a very good discussion earlier in the year about market access barriers, the things that at the moment are preventing British companies, British institutions from investing in Bangladesh.
So did you find any change in last 2 or 3 years?
Well, I think there's a lot of ambition, and we were very pleased to welcome the Honourable Prime Minister to the UK last month. She was there for the COP26 meeting, but she also had a series of bilateral meetings, including with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, and with our Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But she also introduced a roadshow by leading Bangladeshi economic actors aimed at bringing in more British investment. And I think the key challenge, and this comes back to what I was saying about institutions, the key challenge is to put is to make the rhetoric around ambition for getting more international capital into the reality, which will be the lived experience of companies who come here and try to set up new businesses and investment.
What are the sectors they would like to invest here?
The sort of British companies and institutions that are really interested now, and I can say this having talked to many of them, are the ones who sell high-value services. So there are financial services companies who are interested in coming in, and a particular area of strength for us is higher education. And we know that there are around 9 British universities who would very much like to develop operations here in Bangladesh. And at the moment they haven't been able to. The Cross-Border Higher Education Act was passed in 2016, but so far no British university has succeeded in obtaining the permissions that it needs from right across the system to establish itself here. It would be very good if they could, because not only would it offer a new market to British universities, but it would also offer a new opportunity to young Bangladeshis to receive a global standard education.
So far I know, Robert, several times you have talked with our education minister officials as well as education minister, University Grants Commission and other related agencies regarding the opening of British universities here in Bangladesh. What are the major obstacles? Is it legal obstacle or something other business obstacle?
Well, in order for this to happen, we need to have agreement right across the system that administers higher education here, including the Ministry of Education and the University Grants Commission and others. And up till now, it has not been possible to align everybody at the same time behind this proposition. But some of the most recent meetings I've had on this in the last month or so have been much more positive. So I am more optimistic than I was that we will actually be able to make this happen.
But there is no question about the quality of British education system. Rather, it's very good, it's fantastic. But about the cost, sometimes people thought it would be very costly, and that would be not for the middle class people or normal people of Bangladesh. So what might be the cost?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't say now exactly what the cost would be. What I would say is that it would be much less expensive to deliver it here in Bangladesh than it is at the moment. This sort of education is available to prosperous people here who can afford to travel to the UK or the US or Canada or wherever and receive their international education there. And what we would like is for British universities to be able to offer their product here in Bangladesh. And there would obviously need to be safeguards. We'd need to ensure the quality wasn't diluted. But it's a model that works very well in other countries in Asia. So in Malaysia, for example, or in Sri Lanka, this model has worked extremely well. And we would very much like to bring this model to Bangladesh.
Recent time we found British government to have very good connection with our military, and military exchange is increasing, as well as military hardware and other things British government would like to export in Bangladesh. Why are you giving so importance on this military relation?
Well, we have a long-standing military relationship with Bangladesh. Many Bangladeshi officers receive training in the UK. Our peacekeepers work together with Bangladeshi peacekeepers in really tough environments, including Mali. We have equipment. We have a long history of supplying equipment to the Bangladesh Defence Forces. The Navy, particularly the Navy, the early days of the Bangladesh Navy, bought a lot of equipment from the UK, much of which is still in service. And we would like to build on this. And you're absolutely right that when our Prime Ministers met in Glasgow, they talked about an opportunity for us to supply offshore patrol vessels, which the Bangladesh Navy needs to assert control over the exclusive economic zone, which is now demarcated in the Bay of Bengal. So this is equipment that we can see that Bangladesh needs, and we have a competitive offer, and we would very much like this deal to take place, because we think we have what's needed. The Bangladesh Navy knows what it needs, and we have an offer which can supply that need. But there are other areas as well. I mean, we have supplied transport aircraft to the Air Force. We're looking at supplying other naval capabilities. So, I think it's a productive relationship.
So, in future we have seen much more defense cooperation, and that would be your first priority area or other development areas also?
I've got many priorities as High Commissioner, but I think defense cooperation is one, because it's good for both sides, for an independent sovereign Bangladesh to be able to work with the partners of its choice in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. That's obviously a good thing, and we are putting more emphasis on our role in this region following our integrated review in March, and it was a very clear demonstration with the fleet that came to the Pacific and the Indian Ocean earlier in the year. And as I said, I was very pleased that part of that came to Bangladesh. So that's one priority. We have a big priority on climate. We announced at the COP meeting that we would sign a £120 million 6-year agreement with Bangladesh to work together on addressing the climate crisis here in Bangladesh, whether that's on mitigation and carbon emissions and all of that, or on adaptation, where there's a really interesting Bangladeshi story of achievement over the last 50 years from which we can all learn.
Because of location of Bangladesh, the geographical location of Bangladesh, the whole world looks at Bangladesh right now, and you already told about Indo-Pacific strategy and other things, and lot of groups, small groups, 4 or 5 countries make some regional or sub-regional group, and everyone wants Bangladesh to join there. But the foreign policy, the main theme of foreign policy is friendship to all, manners to none, and Bangladesh is still not joined any group particularly, and you own at least 2 groups among these. So,
well, Bangladesh is it's not quite true to say that Bangladesh isn't a member of any groups, because Bangladesh now has the chair of IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association. There was a ministerial meeting last month. Bangladesh is a member of BIMSTEC, which brings together another group
BVIN.
Of regional players, and it's a member of SAARC, the South Asia Regional Cooperation Group. So Bangladesh is a member of these groups, but I think that's completely compatible with a basic foreign policy of friendship to all, malice to none. That's absolutely an understandable and I think very rational foreign policy, but it doesn't preclude cooperating with multilateral organisations and with individual friends and partners like the UK.
Okay, I am going for a break, and before break I would like to ask you one thing, that in 1972 in fact, when Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman just get out from Pakistan jail, and he first went to Britain and then he come back to the country. What was the story behind this? If you share, I want to know this story just after the break. দর্শক, আমরা ছোট্ট একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, একটু পরে ফিরবো। আমরা কথা বলবো ব্রিটিশ হাই কমিশনার রবার্ট ডিকসনের সঙ্গে। আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকবেন নিশ্চয়ই। দর্শক, অনেক ধন্যবাদ যারা যুক্ত ছিলেন এবং স্বাগত যারা নতুন করে যুক্ত হয়েছেন। আমরা কথা বলছি ঢাকায় ব্রিটিশ হাই কমিশনার রবার্ট ডিকসনের সঙ্গে। এক্সেলেন্সি, I want to know about Bangabandhu's first visit just after the independence, before coming to Bangladesh. So, and British government treated him as the Bangladeshi head of the government. So, definitely it's a huge achievement for a new country like Bangladesh. It was a kind of recognition of independent Bangladesh in a very early period in 1972. So, what was the story behind this?
Pakistanis released him when the war was over, and they said, "Where would you like to go?" And he said, "I'd like to go to London." And I think the reason for that is probably because there was a lot of London was the focus for a lot of the international support that had been given to the idea of an independent Bangladesh. So he knew he would receive a warm welcome. I think there was some surprise at the London end that he was coming, because it was all very uncertain. So he arrived, he was taken to Claridge's Hotel. He did his first press conference as a free leader from Claridge's, which is this wonderful hotel in London. But our Prime Minister, Edward Heath, was on holiday, but he came back from his holiday because
cancelling his holiday program.
He came back to London from his holiday in order to meet Bangabadhu, and they had a historic meeting in Downing Street, and I've seen many photographs of this. Edward Heath made clear his support, the support that we would give to the newly independent Bangladesh. And Bangabadhu had a series of other meetings including with the leader of the opposition. So it was clearly a bipartisan support in the UK system, in UK government and politics for an independent Bangladesh. And then in order to enable him to return quickly to Dhaka, because clearly taking over in these very challenging circumstances of a recently won war in a country that would have been very badly affected by the fighting, it was agreed that he would be flown back by the Royal Air Force.
Oh, so that's a really fantastic thing. And not only British government, we found British journalists and British media also play a big role during our independence. And sending the news after 25th March night massacre by Pakistani army, like we can recall Simon Ring and other British journalists. They broadcast it all over the world, and that created a huge pressure on Pakistan government internationally. So do you have any particular research or any document regarding role of British media in the independence of Bangladesh?
I think you're absolutely right that the British media played a crucial role. I mean, what was happening in Bangladesh, or in East Pakistan as it became Bangladesh, was a huge global story, because it was there was Operation Searchlight and everything that happened. Then there was the refugee crisis as people fled into India. Then, of course, there was the activities of the Mukta Bahini and the guerrilla campaign, and then the Indian action, and then finally liberation itself. And at each stage of those events, over nearly a year between March and December, British media played a key role. It was Simon Dring, as you say, but Mark Tully of the BBC was very important. There's some really powerful and moving and shocking reporting by Anthony Mascarenhas of the Sunday Times, and it really demonstrated the value of a free media in explaining to people what's going on and why it matters. And it wasn't just the BBC, it wasn't just the Daily Telegraph, it was also the popular press really picked up on this story, on the suffering of the Bengali people and the scale of the liberation struggle that was going on. But I think the press played a critical role in informing and mobilising public opinion behind the cause of a free Bangladesh. And I think what I take from that is that a free media is an irreplaceable part of a free society.
Crisis, especially in the crisis time.
Especially in a crisis, but also more generally, because free media doesn't come out of nowhere. The fact was that there were these highly skilled, highly professional, courageous journalists who, they didn't come out of nowhere. They were part of the news organisations that employed them. And had the news organisations not existed, the journalists wouldn't have been there. So it shows the value that a free press has collectively in ensuring that people are informed and understand what's going on.
Even, Excellency, after the independence, many British nationals who stayed here in Bangladesh, and they can play a big role for Bangladesh economy, like Julius Francis, you have told. These people they really love this country and the people of this country, and though they are British national, but they are now like Bangladeshis. So how do you evaluate, you told about the Bangladeshi British, now I want to know about the British Bangladeshi. They are some sort of Bangladeshis.
Well, there are many examples, actually. I mean, one of the things I did when I first came here as High Commissioner was present an MBE, a British award, to Sister Lucy Holt in Barishal. Someone who's been in Bangladesh for decades, including during the Liberation War, has made an extraordinary contribution. We mentioned Valerie Taylor and the Centre for the Rehabilitation of the Paralysed. There is Patricia Kerr, who started Shishu Poli, which I visited very recently. And that is a very impressive organisation that really transforms the lives of some of the poorest and least fortunate women and children here in Bangladesh. So there are many examples, and I think it's part of what we call the Brit-Bangla bond-on. This very tight bond that exists between the peoples of Bangladesh and the UK, and it's a very powerful thing. And I feel very privileged as High Commissioner here to be the temporary custodian of this really crucial relationship. But the contribution is made by the individuals, and that's a very powerful personal contribution that they've made, and I have massive respect for all of them.
But same thing also happened in Britain also. We have found lots of Bangladeshi people, and now they become policymakers, they become justice, they are in defense, they are in police, they are in industry. Especially there are some industry led by Bangladeshi people, especially curry industry and other things. So how British government evaluate the role of Bangladeshi British in London and other parts of the UK?
Yeah, is a tremendously positive role. And as I said, many of these families arrived with very little, and they built a role for themselves in society through hard work. They were very keen on education. They worked very hard to make sure that their children had opportunities, and their children worked very hard to make the most of those opportunities in medicine, in the law, in politics, in all sorts of activities. And I think the British Bangladeshi community is one of the most integrated and increasingly confident and prosperous communities that we have in the UK.
So you travel many parts of Bangladesh, and you have the chance to meet with different kind of people. So what's your expression regarding the people of Bangladesh?
The real resource in Bangladesh is the hard work, energy, creativity of the people, and that's what makes the land productive here, and that's what's made the factories productive, and it's that extraordinary creativity and that sort of Bengali self-confidence I have huge admiration for, and I think I feel that wherever I go in Bangladesh. I always feel very warmly received. I think there's a natural hospitality here which is enormously wonderful to receive. I feel there's a very strong link to the UK, a very strong awareness of that. And of course there's always wonderful food. Wherever you go, the food sort of varies a bit, but it's uniformly very good. So for me this has been an extraordinarily interesting, colourful, enjoyable part of my career.
At the same time, you have very good connection with the Bangladeshi press and media. How do you evaluate the press freedom here in Bangladesh?
Well, I think the first thing is that, as I was saying a minute ago, I think the freedom of the media is enormously important in any society, and I think that Bangladesh is fortunate to have an extraordinarily active and skilled press corps across all the different media, whether it's TV, newspapers, online, and the creativity of Bangladeshi creativity is expressed through the media. But it's also clear from talking to my friends in the media that they feel under pressure, and some of the global rankings for media freedom put Bangladesh lower than I think you would expect, given the quality of the journalists here. And as I said, our view is very clear. Britain is leading a media freedom campaign globally with Canada, and I think anything that impedes the freedom of the media to do its job and to hold the government to account is regrettable.
Being a diplomat, do you think you are on the right track? You have the right to speak all the internal issues like election procedure, like participatory election, like election commission formation. You have the right to talk about these issues?
I think it's Britain is very clear about the values that we stand for. We stand for democracy, we stand for human rights, we stand for media freedom. We have a long and historic tradition of supporting these things, and where we feel they're being challenged, then as a diplomat, I think it's part of my job to counter that. Sometimes it's right to say things in public, sometimes it's right to have private conversations, and I try to do both. But I think it's absolutely part of the role of a diplomat to work with our friends and to say things as we think we see them.
Okay. You are not that time in Dhaka. I am telling about the Rana Plaza tragedy.
Yes.
Garments is a big area for our economy, and you are a big buyer, especially UK. And when you were part of EU, then it was one of the largest market. So after the Rana Plaza, we said, even especially the foreign diplomats said it was a wake-up call for Bangladesh. So Bangladesh took some initiative to ensure the safety, security of the labor and quality, other things. But at the same time, the garment sectors of Bangladesh, their complaint is the price is not increasing by the companies. So can you make any comment on this, because you have good connection with the foreign companies also? That I want to know after the break. So again, it's time for a break.
Okay.
দর্শক, আবারও ছোট্ট একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, আমরা ফিরছি একটু পরে, আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকবেন নিশ্চয়ই। দর্শক, স্বাগত আরেকবার। আমরা কথা বলছি ঢাকার ব্রিটিশ হাই কমিশনের সঙ্গে। এক্সেলেন্স, I was talking about the garment situation and responsibility of buyer regarding price also.
Yeah. Well, I think the situation you describe is an interesting one because obviously it's now more than 8 years since the Rana Plaza tragedy. It was a tragedy. I mean, over 1,300 people lost their lives. But I think what has been remarkable is the response after that. So the UK was part of an international effort through the Accord process to work with the factory owners, the suppliers and the government and the unions, so a partnership to raise standards in the industry. And I think what's been achieved is remarkable because we have much higher standards now of industrial safety, much better labour recognition. It's a much healthier industry as a result. And I've been to more, I think I'm right in saying there are more LEED certified platinum factories in Bangladesh than in any other country in the world. And I think the challenge now is for the whole industry to meet the standards of the best. And I understand that this may increase the costs for the suppliers, but I think the point is that consumers in the West are increasingly interested in where their garments come from. They don't want to feel that they're benefiting from people working in exploitative or unsafe conditions. And so I think it's a necessary investment by the suppliers, and I think the good ones have responded extremely well.
We are passing a very terrible situation. The whole world is suffering for this. So do you really think that COVID can make some obstacles between our bilateral relations?
Well, I wouldn't deny there was a period this year when Bangladesh was on we had quite a long red list of countries from which travel was restricted, and Bangladesh was on that list for reasons that were supported by the scientific evidence. But I have to say I was very pleased when this autumn it was possible really to remove almost everyone from the red list, including Bangladesh, because there's no question it's much easier to have a really positive relationship if people can travel freely backwards and forwards. And at the moment that is the case. It's obviously very good that we were able to move quickly to recognise Bangladeshi vaccines and Bangladeshi certification. So your certificate in Bangladesh you can present at the border in the UK and that is accepted as proof that you have been vaccinated. And so at the moment it's working very well. Obviously the question for all of us in the world is what happens with this new Omicron variant. And I don't know the answer to that, but I very much hope that the scientific evidence at each end will continue to indicate that we can have completely free travel.
But during your tenure, almost 1.5 years, it was almost everything was shut down.
Yeah.
So it must hamper your assignment and your planning. So how can you recover the gap?
Well, it's been very frustrating, but I have to say I'm probably the least badly affected person in Bangladesh, because as a diplomat you can do a lot of your work online, you can talk to people on the phone, you can do Zoom, you can do Teams, but it's not the same. And I have hugely enjoyed the opening up of the last few months because there's no question as a diplomat that your ability to do your job properly is hugely enhanced by being able to meet people face to face. And I've been really relishing the fact that that has been possible safely in Bangladesh for the last few months, and I very much hope that will continue.
Yeah, we have two neighbors. We have two direct land border neighbors. One is Myanmar and other is India. Do you really think that international community is doing their best to create pressure on Myanmar, especially when UN called it ethnic cleansing?
Yeah, well, we are doing our best. We are the pen holder on this issue, as they say in the Security Council. We're making sure that this issue is not forgotten. There are many crises in the world at the moment, but we're making sure that this Rohingya crisis, which is the largest single group of stateless people in the world, continue to be the focus of attention in New York, in the UN and elsewhere. You ask whether everyone is doing enough. I couldn't comment on that, but you might want to ask some of the neighbours whether there's perhaps a little more that they could do to encourage the government in Myanmar to accept their responsibilities and enable their citizens to return home.
So what more can Bangladesh do?
Well, I think...
and obviously, there was a tripartite agreement, Bangladesh, China and Myanmar also during UN conference, UNJ in 2019. That also not worked.
Yeah. Well, I think, all I can really comment is what we as the UK can do with Bangladesh. And we do two things. One is we work closely with Bangladesh on the political side to try and bring the people who committed these atrocities to account, to enable the Rohingyas to return home. And we will continue to do that. It remains a large priority, significant priority for our ministers. The other thing that we are doing is working with the Bangladesh government, with NGOs, with the international community to support the Rohingyas while they're here. And as I said, I think they're being well looked after materially. But the question is, how do we make sure that the children are educated and the adults have useful activities that will prepare them better for life when they can return to Myanmar?
Sometimes you said that climate is your priority area, and Bangladesh is, I should say, innocent victim, especially in climate. And many people leaving their motherland and coming to the slums in Dhaka and other big cities, and they lost everything. Every year, two or three times, they lost their homes, their cattle, everything. So what more can international community do for these climate refugees?
Well, I think there are a lot of things. I mean, clearly we just had an enormous conference on this last month in COP26, which I think COP genuinely moved things forward. It established a consensus around mitigation and emissions, around adaptation and around climate finance, and around a whole series of other things like speeding up the movement towards electric vehicles, those things. And I think the thing about Bangladesh is that it is not just a passive victim. Bangladesh is a leader on climate. So the Honourable Prime Minister is the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. She personally and the CVF collectively were a really major voice in Glasgow, and they really helped, I think, to sort of move the debate forward onto focusing on if you like, the innocent victims of climate change. Bangladesh has made quite an ambitious NDC, nationally determined contribution. So that's about making sure that the next stage of growth doesn't mean that Bangladesh follows the sort of high emissions path that has caused the problem in the first place. And also, Bangladesh is a leader on adaptation. I mean, it is really remarkable what has been achieved in terms of the ability to withstand cyclones, the ability to make communities more resilient to flooding. So I think the world has a lot to learn from Bangladesh. And this is what our new £120 million Bangladesh UK Climate and Environment Partnership is designed to enable.
Sometimes we found some convicted people who are convicted in the law of the Bangladesh by the highest court. They took shelter in UK, and according to your law, you not disclose their status also. They may be political, they may be some businessmen, other issues. And recent time we also found some name in some corruption list, in global corruption list and other things, and they have very good connection in UK, perhaps their family living there or other things. So sometimes people thought, is UK is a safe place for the convicted people or the culprits? How can you explain this?
Well, as I said, we don't comment on individual cases. Yeah. What I would say is if there's strong evidence that people are committing crimes in the UK, or they have committed crimes for which there is an extradition case, then we're always happy to look at new evidence. What I would also note, though, is that the UK law does provide very strong protection for individuals, and that is completely independent of government under our system. So I can't promise an outcome, but we'll always be happy to look at new evidence.
Okay, then there is a political debate always going here in Bangladesh, especially if we discuss about election system, and you were part of that. Several times you met with our policymakers. Even there were a group of diplomats, they met president to reform the election commission, and perhaps you were the partner of election commission, of standing election commission mechanism and system. So what's your assumption regarding Bangladesh national election, next national election?
Well, it's for Bangladesh. There is more than enough capacity in Bangladesh to deliver a good election. But I think I would say that an election it's a really crucial national moment, and it is critical to any democratic system like the one that the 1972 constitution in Bangladesh is an admirable document. And I think it would be wonderful to have an election in 2023 whenever it happens that demonstrably lives up to the ideals and ambitions of the 1972 constitution. So it provides a framework where there can be free discussion before the election, where any party can organise and operate freely, has a chance to put its point of view in public. People can be confident that their vote will be counted. They can be confident that they can cast their vote, that other people won't have cast votes on their behalf. So I think an election that is demonstrably free and fair in every respect would be a very good basis for Bangladesh as it goes through the LDC graduation process. Because as I said, I think what is really important to the next stage of growth in Bangladesh is going to be institutional quality. And I think the founding moment for any democratic system is its electoral moment.
If I want to ask you to evaluate the human rights situation here in Bangladesh.
Well, I think there are issues and concerns. We put them in our annual human rights report, so you can look at them online. There are some specific issues, and in general, we work closely with the government to explain where we have concerns, and we do a lot of work to support civil society in its role, whether it's on exposing corruption, whether it's about making sure that human rights concerns are raised. Because again, I think it comes back again to this issue of institutional quality. And I think, a good human rights environment is likely to be an environment which supports wider good governance, supports wider democratic practice. And that is going to be the best foundation for the next stage of growth for Bangladesh as a middle-income country.
Bangladesh is celebrating 50 years, so when it would be 60 years, when it would be 70 years, 75 years, where Bangladesh will stand?
Well, I think Bangladesh is on an extremely good trajectory, and I'm very optimistic actually about the potential for Bangladesh, because I think, as I said, there's been great progress on the basic social indicators. There's a tremendous amount of sort of human capacity and potential here. There's some very strong, very impressive private sector companies who I've worked with, and I think the challenge is going to be for the government and the system to provide the sort of institutional capacity to really harness that potential of the people, the private sector, and produce growth which is reasonably equitable, gives everyone a chance, looks after the interests of the many, if you like, the millions of people in this country, and not just a very small number of people. And it makes Bangladesh a place where international companies can confidently invest in a way that is good for them and good for Bangladesh. And I think the UK I hope will be a very strong partner. That's what we want to be for this next stage of the journey. And I've got another, I'll be doing 4 years here, so I'll be here for a bit longer, and very much looking forward to spending the next year and a bit, laying the foundations for that productive relationship, building on all the wonderful things that we already have in our relationship, and taking it to the next stage in preparation for graduation.
Thank you very much, Robert, for your time. Best of luck for you.
Thank you very much.
দর্শক, এই ছিল আমাদের আজকের আলোচনা। ব্রিটিশ হাইকমিশনের যেমন প্রত্যাশা বাংলাদেশ একটি সাম্যের দেশ হবে, বাংলাদেশের সব মানুষের জন্য অধিকার নিশ্চিত হবে, বিদেশিরা এখানে নিরাপদে স্বাচ্ছন্দ্যে বাংলাদেশের মানুষের স্বার্থে বিনিয়োগ করবে, সেরকম একটি বাংলাদেশ এদেশের মানুষের প্রত্যাশা। সেই প্রত্যাশা শেষ করতে চাই। ভালো থাকবেন সবাই, অনেক ধন্যবাদ সঙ্গে থাকার জন্য।